The UK has a long-standing obsession with Nike Air Max sneakers. They've become a symbol of youth culture, street style, and believe it or not, even crime. Let's take a closer look at why certain subcultures in the UK are obsessed with Air Maxes. First of all, it's important to understand the history of the Air Max. The Air Max line was first introduced by Nike in 1987 with the release of the Air Max 1. This revolutionary sneaker designed by Tinker Hatfield featured a visible air unit in the sole. That visible air bubble was brilliant because it set Nike apart from their competitors. It was brilliant marketing, something Nike was no stranger to. However, it didn't come without some pushback. Tinker Hatfield, the shoe's designer, nearly lost his job advocating for exposing the air unit. Tinker's inspiration for the shoe came from a recent trip he took to Paris where he saw the controversial Pompidou Center. The building was designed by a committee of architects that included Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers. The architectural structure of the building broke new ground in the 70s. The whole idea was that it reveals all the inner workings of the building, and to this day, it still stands out among traditional French architecture. This idea of turning a design inside out intrigued Tinker Hatfield, and that's where the suggestion to expose the airbag in the Air Max 1 came from. This shoe, the Air Max, is like the poster child for Nike's famous air technology. And since then, they've used Air Max models to showcase the ongoing innovation with Nike Air. It's a really big deal for the company. And from the OG Air Max 1 to the more recent Nike Air Max DN, Nike's Air Max line has continued to evolve. There's a lot to choose from here. Literally an Air Max for anybody. Go ahead and gift your grandma a pair of Air Maxes. Just make sure they're not the Air Max TNs or people are gonna think she's in a gang. More on that in a bit. I guess you could say they're also super versatile. Yeah, Nike made them for running, but it's more of a lifestyle shoe these days. I mean, personally, Nike Air, if it's not Zoom Air or other iterations of the technology, just like straight Nike Air, it's all right. It's pretty good for some cushioning and support, and you know, if you engage in a lot of physical activity, it's a decent choice, but they have better stuff. But when it came out, it was revolutionary. But the marketing behind it is crazy. I mean, Air, you see it, it's like, whoa, you're standing on a cloud, right? That's why your local FedEx driver and Little League baseball coach, Amazon worker, and soccer mom all rocked the same whack and played out Air Max 270. At least that's the scene here in the US. Air Max 270s for miles. Let's talk about Europe though. In some ways, it could be considered the land of the Air Max. Although in recent times, Jordans and Nike Air Force Ones have been making waves. But despite that, there's always going to be a certain loyalty toward an Air Max shoe in Europe. So much so that every country in Europe seems to have their own Air Max sneaker that they claim as their own. For example, France has the Air Max Plus TN and the Netherlands has the OG Air Max 1. Nike knows this. That's why back in 2020, they released two Air Max 1s that celebrated both London and Amsterdam. Both colorways reflect the tones of each city's details, like the London pair, which has some stitching that looks like the River of Thames flowing. The Amsterdam pair has a windmill on the heel and three crosses on the tongue, which are taken directly from the city's coat of arms. A few years ago, Nike released a city pack for the Air Max Big Window, which featured Lyon, Rotterdam, and Los Angeles. Okay, but why are Air Maxes so popular in the UK? Well, you see, these joints have kind of taken a life of its own within the grime music scene. Grime is a genre of hip-hop that originated in the UK in the early 2000s and is often characterized by its use of hard beats and confrontational lyrics. Artists like Dizzy Rascal, Skepta, and Wiley have all played a major role in the rise of grime and have become known for their love of Air Max sneakers. In fact, the Air Max has become such a staple in the grime scene that you'll often see some of these artists rocking them on stage. Like, it's pretty common to see some Air Max Plus TNs or some Air Max 95s on feet while on stage. Obviously, the love for Air Max sneakers in the grime community extends far beyond just the artists themselves. Many fans of the genre also sport the iconic sneakers as a way to signal to the world that they are for the music and for the culture. And the influence of grime music on Nike has been significant, with the brand collaborating with grime artists on exclusive sneaker releases and even creating entire collections inspired by the genre. In 2018, Nike released the Nothing Was the Same collection, which features a range of Air Max sneakers inspired by grime culture and the music of Skepta. You could say the collection was a hit among grime fans, and it kind of solidified Air Max's place in grime music's culture. It's not only Air Maxes that are being adopted by the grime music scene. Also, Nike Nike Shox. In the same year, Nike again collaborated with the British rapper Skepta and released a Nike Shox TL. If you know Nike Shox sneakers, you know that the Nike Shox TL is like on the extreme end of Nike Shox. It's got like shocks throughout the entire midsole, and it's a super retro look, but I think Skepta and Nike did a pretty good job with these. They also released a Tailwind 5 with a similar style, but this one in a bright blue colorway. When Skepta and Nike's collection dropped, you could often find him rocking these on stage, like in public appearances, award shows and music videos. Skepta made it clear in an interview that he loved Shox and how they reminded him of his youth. The Nike Shox remind me of my childhood and growing up in London. I used to see people wearing these on the bus and I always wanted a pair. They're a classic shoe that will always be cool. Both dropped in limited quantities and quickly became sought after by fans of his music. It's kind of become a symbol of Skepta and Grime's influence on UK culture and fashion. However, nothing says that a sneaker is part of a nation's culture more than them having their own special name for the shoe. In this case, the 110s. Sorry, I mean the Air Max 95s. These are the Air Max of the UK, named after the price it used to cost when they first came out, 110. The Air Max 95 was once a sneaker that was highly sought after by your local dope dealer. The OG neon colorway is iconic on the block. The sneaker was so infamous in certain cities like London that the UK police force listed the Air Max 95's footprint as its second most recorded footprint in history on crime scenes. Obviously, this gives them a certain status in the streets. They hold a ton of cultural weight in the UK, and it makes them the perfect silhouette for Nike and Cortez to collaborate on. Cortez is a London-based streetwear brand that's known for having this sort of rebellious image. I mean, the brand has a logo inspired by the infamous Alcatraz prison, which clearly signals that they do things differently and break rules. From an outsider looking in, they definitely give me bad boy vibes. In a good way, I like it. This collab is even more special when you consider that Nike sued the company back in 2019 for using the name Cortez, which is not only the brand's name, but also one of Nike's most widely known sneakers, the Nike Cortez. But after a 180 turn by Nike, it was announced that in 2022, the two brands would be collaborating on an Air Max 95. The release of the collab in London reflected British culture and its ties with the nation's most popular sport, football. The drop for the shoe was organized on a football pitch, and to get the chance to purchase them, you had to hit the goal's crossbar with the ball, bringing together two of the UK's biggest loves, football and 110s. Nike also dropped an Air Max 95 110. This is not a Cortez collab, it's just a 95 110 because they know that people call them 110s in the UK. And this sneaker featured tones of a grey urban London and is also inspired by the OG British 10-pound note. When Nike makes sneakers like this, it sort of raises the cultural status of a shoe, in this case the 95 in the UK, which it already had, but now it's even higher when they dedicate a shoe to it. And in that way, this brings Nike closer to their target consumer. This is a marketing technique called LCCP, also known as local consumer culture positioning. It associates the brand with local cultural meanings, reflects the locals' cultural norms and identities, and is portrayed as consumed by local people in the national culture. So people think that it's locally produced and it's made specifically for local people. I guess it is made specifically for local people, but it's made by a giant corporation. It's also worth noting that in the UK and other parts of the world like Australia, certain Nike Air Max models have been loosely associated with hoodlums or low-level criminals. You guys know what an Eshe is? Basically, it's like an Australian thug. Eshes love the Air Max TNs out there. In fact, in Australia and both in the UK, the silhouette is commonly referred to simply as TNs. The hexagonal TN logo, which stands for Tuned Air, came to define the shoe. You see, Tuned Air was a groundbreaking shoe technology for Nike when it first came out. The whole idea of this new technology was that it allowed the airbags and certain parts of the airbag to be tuned to a very specific PSI, which in turn created more comfort and stability. But the TN is really rooted in the city streets, where it's become a fave to hustlers and eshays. Thanks to the silhouette's crazy and intimidating design, the TN symbolized the bad boy image in the UK, Australia, and even France. I have friends in Australia who are sneakerheads but don't rock TNs for that very reason. Over here in the US, we love them. I'll rock Air Max TNs any day of the week. I love the Hyper Blues and the Sunsets. It's one of my favorite Air Maxes of all time. Anyways, in the 1980s and 1990s, Air Max sneakers became associated with certain subcultures in the UK, such as football hooligans and ravers. Although football hooligans mainly wear Adidas, some of them did rock Air Maxes. And these guys were sometimes involved in like low crime criminal activity. This association may have contributed to the perception of Air Max sneakers as being connected to crime. But, you know, we can't say that for a fact. This is allegedly. But if you know, you know. Also, the Air Max line in its entirety and even some Nike Shocks are a pretty important part of your uniform if you're somebody who's associated with roadmen culture. Most of the time it's paired with tracksuit bottoms and puffer jackets. A good signal of what's going on in this culture is just by looking at some of the drops that Cortez, the brand we spoke about earlier, has done. One of their bigger product launches is when they released their very own puffer jackets. In order to get one, you had to bring another puffer jacket to swap for it. They're kind of famous for doing these kind of chaotic drops. Like recently in Brooklyn, they did this drop for some Nike Air Huaraches. I think this is like their first flagship drop in the United States, and it was like crazy. They had people all over the place trying to find where the drop was. People didn't know where it was, and yeah, it's kind of their thing, which I love. Again, it's like a rebellious nature of the brand. Back to the Air Max 95 or 110s or whatever you want to call them. I mean, it's kind of like the Nike Cortez here in the US, which is like, you know, you see that shoe and you immediately think gang affiliation, especially if you're on the West Coast. I don't know though. You guys let me know in the UK, are Air Maxes considered, you know, gangster shoes? How about in Australia? How about the TNs? I'm pretty sure the TNs are considered esche, right? Let me know, I'm curious to know, mates. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for making it this far to the video. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing before you peace out. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Peace.